Let's see. There we go. It's starting. All right. Stephen, welcome, man. Glad to have you on the show today.
Appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
So today we are digging into really wanted to dig into like how like we're redefining sales leadership on Mixology today. And there's really three kind of areas that I really wanted to cover. AI. I know your personal passion is around like go to network, personal networks. And then also just like what does the future of go to market look like? And so, for everybody listening in, Stephen comes from a very impressive background 6 years at Microsoft across a variety of leadership roles. You had to send an outreach. You're now advising companies, and word on the street is there might be a book in the works. But
There
tell us a little
is.
bit about yourself, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's interesting. Somebody asked me the other day on a very similar scenario, hey, tell me about yourself. And I started by saying, a few years ago, I wrote an article that said the entreployee, because really what I am at heart is an entrepreneur. And I started several companies early on in my 20s. A lot of failures, more failures than I could count, basically two successes. But what's interesting is as you go in and out of entrepreneurship, employee, the W-2 roles, different things of that nature, you tend to realize that you can have success no matter where you're at. You just have to make sure the environment is conducive for the skills that you bring to the table. And what I've really found is that there are so many people that have this entrepreneurial spirit. We hear it all the time that we want it in this W-2 format. We want to hire people that way. But the truth of the matter is, as long as the environment is conducive to unleash the skills that an entrepreneur has, you can do both. So I tend to tell people, and I start off and just simply say, hey, I'm the entreployee.
Well, man, other than my video coming off, which we can have some good laughs at later, really excited to jump into this, man. And just because I know you've scaled revenue engines, you've optimized go to market. But before that, I always want to ask what's something you've read, watched, or learned recently that stuck with
My goodness. It's always interesting because I'm trying to think what I've learned. I'm in the middle of reading the book Super Communicators. I always tell people, pick up the book Proactive Selling. I'm a big Atomic Habits fan. I'm a big Jolt Effect fan, Challenger, all that stuff. Here's something, especially in this go to network season, or if you want to say this passion that I really have, is just the fact that how many people don't recognize that go to network or warm referrals is not a future thing. It's not a now thing. It's not a new thing. It's always been thing. For the past decade, though, as a general rule, this go to market motion has moved away from it. And so what most people aren't realizing, and this is what I've learned, is most people don't recognize or have the patience to have longer pipe gen on the front end to have a shorter sales cycle on the back end. And there's just such impatience in this market because of all the investment and all that has come in. I've been very surprised that I've had to actually explain that to so many individuals and look them dead in the eye and say, so you think cold calling and cold outbound is more effective than warm referrals? Are you really going to make me convince you of this?
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to flip it on you. Do you think that part of it is the hangover of bad habits of like the golden era of SaaS? Or is it potentially also like there's this generational shift in sales happening right now, right? I'm curious, like what are your some of the thoughts? Because I'll be the first one as a sales leader. I do not believe in the more dials. Let me correct that. Depending on the industry you're in, there are industries, right? So like when I led at Uber Eats, we didn't do email because restaurant owners don't pick up, like they don't answer their email, they pick up their phone. And so it was a very call heavy.
Yep.
But every organization I've walked into, there's always this mentality around more calls, more calls, more calls. Where for me, I'm like, it's a balanced approach. It's about, are you calling at the right time or are you sending the email at the right time, et cetera? So I'm curious of your take on that because you hit on that. It's a really important one, I think.
So here's my 2 cents. It's funny that you asked that exact question because I was literally thinking about something similar this morning. And I am a big believer in math.
Hmm.
More isn't better, but more is more. You probably have, as a general, and this is a principle, the more quantity, you're probably going to have more wins. Just is what it is. However, it's the whole quality thing as well. I don't believe in quality over quantity. I think it's a yes and principle. And how do you continue to grow? But there probably is some diminishing returns because there's only a certain amount of an addressable market, right? And so that's one. I actually do believe in more quantity, but you have to know when those diminishing returns are. It's a general rule. It just makes sense. The
Hmm.
second part is generational. I absolutely believe there's a shift in generation. And so when I come from a generation where it's pick up the phone and call your friends and get to know people, you do things on a handshake, you back of the napkin deals for anybody who remembers that terminology. I was actually surprised. There's a generation that did not understand what I meant when I said back of the napkin deals. And, that's part of my learning too is, growing and understanding every single generation. But what I've also found is this next generation, the social selling, the online, the followers, like we're all about that, right? Myself included. I want more followers, but I also want more relationships. Now, even though that is true, I can borderline guarantee you that if Gen whatever, if you talk, it doesn't matter, Z, X, it doesn't matter. I guarantee you they would more likely pick up a call, respond to an email from somebody that they knew over somebody that they don't,
Hmm.
outside of if it's a celebrity, right? Now, that's why people are going the social media route, but that's still only going to be the top 1 or 2%. So, in my mind, what game do I want to play? I want to get to know as many people as possible because the likelihood of me being a celebrity is just, and I have zero desire for that anyways, right? So that's the generational aspect. And then the third thing you talked about is this a hangover from SaaS? No, I actually think that what we created is the disease, right? We literally created all this tech that created the problem, thinking that it was the solution. And again, it's not right or wrong. That's how we progress as society.
Yeah.
But you think about, is the world better or worse today? That's, some people would say that's debatable. So there's just certain things that I would say at one point that was the answer is now the problem. But that's actually life, right?
Yeah, I think it's part also of like the evolution. It's the what I actually enjoy about being a go-to-market leader is because what works today is not going to work tomorrow, especially, and we'll get into this in a little bit, especially with AI. AI is just 10x everything. And so now you're like balancing that next little piece before it even reaches the chasm because it hasn't even hit the chasm yet, right? So originally we are going to talk about AI first, but I want to jump into this go to network, right? Just because we've already been on this. Like there's a big growing focus on it. Like personal, organizational, there's the new GTM multiplier. So like how we connect both of the individuals and as teams can have a huge impact on that pipeline, that growth. And you hit a really important piece around balancing the quantity and the quality. And that is the double-edged sword of like every revenue leader they're trying to figure out. And so how was building or how are you going about building your personal brand and network? How has that influenced your approach to this go to network when it comes to either yourself or working with other sales teams and sales leaders?
Yeah. I'm trying to think how to answer that. Uh, I'd say there's multiple prongs to this. I'll just first say strategically, and then I'll tell you some of the tactics that I'm doing right now, because I'm in a stage of my career and my life that what I'm about to share means I have the ability. So there's going to be three parts to this. First is just the philosophy is I believe that the more people, truly quantity, the more people I know, the more opportunities will naturally surface. It's just math. Again, if I knew all 8 billion people on the planet, it'd be pretty cool, right? Now that's not possible, right? But I also don't put a filter on who I need to know. I try to meet anybody and everybody, take time for anybody and everybody. That may sound counterintuitive and not productive because there's only 24 hours in a day. So I'll kind of caveat that here in a second. There's two tactics that I want to share with you. One is what I'm doing right now because of the stage of my career that I'm in. And maybe I probably should have shared why and how I'm in the phase of life I'm in. So I should just state this very quickly is I'm in a stage where I'm what I call semi-retired because I do have young kids. I decided to stay at home. I've done very well over the course of my career. So I have the ability. I know not everybody has that ability, but I do have time on my side, a little bit of time because with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, there's actually probably less time now, but
Yeah.
it's a lot more flexible, right? So that's the backstory. What I'm doing right now specifically is I'm going through all of my first connections. And I'm literally, because what's been happening in my life as of late is I get a lot of requests saying, Stephen, you're first connected to so and so. Can you introduce me? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no, I don't really know them. And so, you know what I said? I said, you know what? I want to know as many of my first connections as possible. So I'm actually going through and just asking people to do these, what I call no agenda meetings. Now, what I have found, and I left back in August and decided to stay home and just do things part time, as they come. I had no agenda, no plans to go do anything, but a lot of things have come to fruition because people know my background, know my skills. I have not stopped generating revenue since then because of my network. I get on calls just checking up on people. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm not doing anything. Hey, can you help us with this? Can you do this? They know the skills. And then I get referred, and then I get referred, and then I get referred. So much that I haven't even had time to update what I'm technically doing on my LinkedIn profile, but revenue's coming in. So again, this is part of why I'm also a yes and person, because do the social selling, get the leads, get the DMs, all the things on LinkedIn, do the cold calls, do whatever. But for me in my life, my revenue is coming in 100% through network right now. And part of it is because I keep setting these no agenda meetings and I'm just getting to know people. That's actually how you and I connected. Actually,
Yeah.
there was no, like, you weren't trying to sell me anything. I wasn't trying to sell you anything. And we got close, and who knows what this is going to turn into, or you may be calling me and say, hey, do you know so-and-so? Can you introduce my team to so-and-so? I'd probably be like, yeah, I like Heath. I trust Heath. Right. But
I
then
saw your background. That's what drove it. I saw that Mamba mentality, and I was like, we got
I
to.
I got to know this guy. Right. But here's what I've been telling a lot of sales teams when I'm coaching them and I'm training them, especially on how to install a go-to-network culture. It is very hard to, as an executive sales leader, to measure no agenda meetings, measure networking, because you really don't know where it's going to lead. A lot of that is strategic philosophy. And so when you talked about how SaaS and all the stuff shifted and we're in this hangover, no, what really happened is there was a model and there's math behind it. If you do 100 calls, you're going to get this many, connects. And so it's just easy math because you just can say, if I do 200 of these and so forth, right? With networking, you don't really have that. So it is a balanced approach where I tell executive leaders, just maybe even have a subset, just go focus on meeting people in the marketplace. And we'll talk later in this conversation about some of the steps that I tell sales teams of how to go start building their network, because there's 3 very specific things you have to do: is network creation, network activation, and network maintenance. I wrote about this the other day on LinkedIn. We can dive into those. But essentially, if you are a full-time sales rep, my opinion is you should spend 5 to 10% of your time just literally networking and just no agenda meetings. And I'll explain why with just one statement that'll sound provocative, but I dare anyone to try this on. We are taught as sellers, focus, 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 transaction. Me and you were talking about a scenario where it's like, when someone's super transactional, all of a sudden, boom, you move on to the next one, because if it's not a buyer, then you got to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's what focus does. Focus stifles creativity. It's the difference between a laser beam and a light bulb. They're both wonderful. You need both of them. But the reason focus stifles creativity is because you are now put in a box and you're creating barriers and you're saying, this is my agenda. This is what I'm here for. So you actually stifle the other person's creativity and your own, and you don't know what greatness would be outside the box, which is why you need probably 5 to 10% of just meetings of your week to be completely open and just get to know people. And I mean, I've had some dream gigs happen in the last few months that would have never happened if I weren't just meeting people. And I actually have had more revenue and I've had a higher per hour rate, the highest per hour rate of my career over the last few months. And I'm semi-retired, right? So I'm telling you, I believe in it because it's working for me, but I could usually help most people hit that as well.
Man, I like that. And I like the 5 to 10%. It's very doable. It's very realistic. And it's funny because I actually just had a conversation with my sales team, very similar as you were talking through this. And I was like, we're a sales engagement tool. Why are we not connecting with every single account executive that we can connect with just to have a conversation? Who's the person that could potentially open that door immediately by saying this tool doesn't work, but this one does? And I think it's also a big one that you're talking about, right? We were talking about before we started the recording was for how big our industries are, the network is still actually pretty tight.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are AEs today, those are the people that potentially in 5 years from now are going to be that next decision maker. Start
Yes.
building that network today because it will bear fruit down the future. And so I love that 5 to 10%. So I got two follow-up questions for you that you hit on. One was, you are blessed. You're in this position where you have a little bit more of that flexibility in that time. So maybe the answer is that 5 to 10% of like, what would it look like if you're a person that is still working, 40, 50, 60 hours a week? How do you manage that? Number two, to then caveat that is like, is this something that can be like a network first go to market strategy? Or is there a right time that this gets deployed? Is it industry? Is it deal size? Is it stage of the company's growth? Like, what are some of the things that you've noticed or have influence on that you're like, this is where we're seeing that it's the right way?
Such a great question. So I am very opinionated about this for a couple reasons, right? I typically make a statement as a potential mic drop moment, especially if I'm talking to an executive, right? If I talk to any of my peers, the first thing I ask them when we start talking about go to network versus like building this plan, and I let them talk about how they do their numbers and all that stuff, and I go, interesting. So you want them to make this many dials, you want this many emails sent, all these different things. Hey, Bob, let's just call it Bob. I'll say Heath because hey, Heath, when was the last time you answered a cold call or a cold email from someone you totally didn't know and granted them a meeting to come sell you on something?
I can't remember the last time. I
I
literally,
remember.
I had a
I
phone call
remember
call
mine.
me today. If you call me, and just shout out to anybody out there, if you call me and I don't have your phone number saved, it's going to voicemail. If you leave me a good voicemail, then maybe I'll call you back. But it's funny because I had the same thing happen today, and for some reason I answered it, and it was one of my old Australian colleagues that just moved to Texas because it was a San Marcos number. So I was like, well, my brother lives there, maybe something's going on. Outside of that, yeah, I'm not answering the phone.
And
I get
that's
way
my
too many
point.
phone calls.
That's my point. The very teams that are bombarding their teams with like all these metrics don't answer it on the other side. And it's because we are using the tools that are at our disposal in a very poor manner, right? That's just not how you use the tools. You don't just spam people, you don't do it. And so that's where my mic drop moment happens. And I go, when you're in a forecast review, whether you're a seed stage all the way up to enterprise, and the rep says, man, we can't get it's stalled, they're not calling back, they're not doing whatever, what's the very next thing, if not the next one or two things that somebody asks in that meeting to that executive or to anyone in that forecast review?
It revolves around three things. One was the last activity, last phone call, or last meeting.
Okay. And all those revolve around who, right? So it's the word who. Because the question that 90% of the time somebody brings up is, who do you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll go to anybody in the company. Do you know anybody at the company? They'll ask the CEO, especially if you are an early stage, you'll go to the board, you'll go to the VC, you'll go to your executives. Who do you know? And it's not the AE that breaks in the door because they just usually don't have the vast network that executives
Mm-hmm.
do. And so and I'm like, so why are we waiting till the end to do that? Why don't we just start there? Because again, the data shows that if you are brought in by a warm referral, not only does it shrink, like, because you're just literally handing over trust, that's what's happening. So you shorten the sales cycle down. But the problem is this: if I make 100 calls, I might get an opportunity. It may take me 30% longer to get that same opportunity. But if it was a 12-month sales cycle, even though it took 30% more at the front end, it might take 9 months to close the same deal. And that's the part that you have to have belief in. But when I sit and explain that to individuals, they're like, yeah, but I can't measure it. And I get it. Hard to manage what you can't measure. I totally get it. But every single person that's probably listening is probably shaking their head. Like, yeah, we actually, that is true because we empirically know. It's called common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But yet when we build our models, we seem to not bring that in because we're trying to measure it based on dollars and cents. And all I'm saying is, let's start with the network, even if it's 5 to 10%, and then move to the other side, because this is actually what I shared with the sales team yesterday. Here's what it sounds like. If I was trying to get to, let's say I'm trying to get to you, and I just can't seem to find anyone that truly knows you. But it's the 6 degrees of separation, right? So I went through this training on teaching people how to use the 6 degrees of separation. Did you do that to me?
No, I
No,
heard
you're
that
being
as
funny.
well.
You totally did that.
I pressed the wrong button.
I was like, damn, is this going that horrible? I was like, that is
No,
well played.
my bad. I pressed the wrong button. I'll delete that.
No, that might have been the funniest thing. It's like when you're buzzed off with a cane, like you're on stage and you see the cane come across and pull you over. I'm like,
I mean, if you want
I
to
was
have
like,
some
damn.
fun, we can kick it off this way too.
Like the buzzer, like, no, you suck. I literally thought you were saying, nah, Steven, no, this content sucks. We got to go somewhere else. I was like, cool. Well, this is the best I got, man. I guess
We're not,
we ending it now.
we're not going to edit this. We're going to keep this one rolling. Keep going.
I totally like it, man. Who cares? Who cares? Okay, so hold on, real quick. Grade my content so far of what we're talking about, like 1 through 10. Do I need to
So we're
step it
talking about
up
the
a notch?
deal. You got 9 months sales cycle.
Yeah.
I was following.
Okay, got it. So here's the thing. If I'm trying to get to you, here's what cold outbound, in my opinion, should look like. There's a lot of great trainings out there. So listen to some of the stuff that's out there. There's great ones like Sam McKenna, Jen Allen Knuth. Like there's so many people. Morgan Ingram. I could just go off. There's so much out there that is good. All that is 100% accurate. Here's just one thing to add. If you tried to network first, imagine picking up the phone call, because yesterday I was walking a team through the 6 degrees of separation and some of the steps on how that study was done and how I actually legit in my first part of my career would go after trying to find somebody in a geography, in an industry, or in a role, right? But net of it is this: if I at least make the effort, here's what a voicemail would look like to Heath. Hey Heath, this is Stephen Oommen over here. I have tried at length and asked probably 6 or 7 people if they knew you, and all of them are first connect to you, but no one actually knows you. So it makes me think that you might be a ghost, man. But hey, I've been trying to reach you. I've tried to do it the right way. I don't like to cold outbound people if I don't know them. That way you come in through a warm referral and know that I am legit. Like you hear something like that, it's different. And I actually legit tried. And sometimes I'll name drop and say, I've reached out to Billy, Mary, Steve, whatever. And all of them didn't know you personally, but they are connected to you. Because I know all 6 of those people would say something good about me. So if they at least recognize the name, that's really all I'm looking for, right? Versus this like long, here's why I'm calling, you should call me back, that sort of thing. But, hey, I might shoot you a text or shoot me a text back at this number if you're open to a dialogue, this is why I'm calling, just something of that nature. But the whole point is I want to preface it with try to get a connection to you, man. I'm trying, like, doing everything possible. And then to me, cold outbound that's the last straw, if you will. That's kind of the way I think through it. But again, that's just my model, if you will.
Man, there's so many things that were going through my head other than putting the sounds on you. First thing, as I was thinking through, is like there's product-led growth. You got product-led sales. There's sales-led growth. Why don't we just start calling this network-led growth? Because that's
I
really
like it.
what we're talking about here, right? And I think a couple of things that you hit on too, and I think this is for sales leaders or even IC. I think you hit a good one. right, is get leadership involved early in.
It's a
Like
cultural
it
thing.
is like the bane of my existence when I have to ask an AE like, "Hey, what do you want me to send them? Like, let me reach out to them to like help you with this deal." And I think like part of that, it really depends on the organization and culture that you come from, unfortunately, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there still are some leaders that want to sit behind the desk and want to just look at the numbers. But I think that is evolving to your point to where like you got to be a frontline leader, regardless if you're a VP or an executive. It was one of the things I loved about when I was at Airwallex was, and our CEO, I mean, we're valued, I think at like $6 billion right now,
Mm-hmm.
and our CEO would still get involved in deals. Like he was like our biggest SDR because he was the one bringing in all the enterprise deals. And that was
Yeah.
something that really stood out to me. And so I think like two things for where you can do go to network without really having to even working on building your network beforehand. But one thing that I actually do is I actually have a report for every active deal that's in our pipeline. I have a report that has every contact associated with that deal and their LinkedIn profile. I'm just going to start sending connection requests because I just want to make sure they have a face with a name. And then when
Mm-hmm.
I send that email, there's that connection point, right? So I think like there's a strategy, a long-term play, but I think there's even little short-term plays that leaders and reps can put in today that will start to bear that fruit and speed of the sales cycle.
And, I know we're going to talk a little bit about AI, but this is actually where I think AI can help. And there's so many different technologies out there that can help with this. There's centralized, there's ComScore, there's the Swarm, there's Hi5, there's all these places in the sort of go to network relationship building type of place to have that. Because at the end of the day, there's a couple things you said, right? When you're early stage, guess what? You flat out ask the board and the VC to introduce you, and that's how you find your first customers. Then when you're in that middle stage, everybody's a sales rep. As you continue to grow, the only time and I still don't think you sit behind the desk, but you have to focus on the bigger enterprise deals, is when you become a household name. And then guess what? Like, if you're at Microsoft, if you're at ADP, if you're at Google, AWS, like these big brand names, yeah, is Jeff Bezos and Satya the biggest SDR? They are for some of the most massive deals, but now you have a brand in front of you. But this is why I keep saying everything rises and falls on leadership, and this is a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you think about the movement of an entire company, and I'll give you an example. I was training a company that was in the government space two weeks ago, and somebody brought up a deal that they're working on, and no one thought to ask the following question, but my entire family, except me, works for the government. And the specific division that this gentleman was talking about is literally like my father was a DBA, my mom was a BI analyst, my sister was in finance and now in HR, my other sister was an engineer, like all for the exact same division. And I'm sitting right across. I didn't say anything because, like, again, it's a culture to just ask people, who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? And nobody seems to ask that at the end of every call. And it's like, that's why I say it's a habit and a culture. And so yesterday when I was training, or I was talking to this team, somebody asked, so do you just set apart time for prospecting to network? And I'm like, that's literally like saying I set apart time to breathe. No, like every conversation should have somewhere in there like, Heath, who's the coolest person you've met in the last 6 months? Kind of like you asked about books. People will ask about books all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Rarely do people ask around people. And so it's a culture, it's a value, and it's a belief. And so for me, my belief is people have value. And number two is all people have value. So it's not, I love what you said
I
before. It's like,
love
why aren't we
that.
talking to all the AEs? They have value. Not because they're going to be a CEO one day, but they have value because they're humans. But oh, by the way, they might be the CEO of a company one day too.
Man, that was a great summary. Yeah. And like before we segue into AI, like you were talking about, I want to close out the go to network. You were talking about the basically like the playlist or the framework that you can give to people that can help them. Hey, if I want to start building my go to network today, how do I go about that?
Yep. I'm actually going to read it because I had just posted about this the other day. And so I told you, I said there was three different hierarchies, right? You've got network creation, network activation, network maintenance. So I'm going to talk to somebody as if they were brand new, coming out of college. It's their first job. What do? It's network creation, right? But the secret is realizing that it's actually network maintenance that you start with first, because every human being on the planet has a network. I don't care if it's your mother, father, sister, brother. Like, think about where I came from, right? And I was just giving that example. Everybody knows someone else. So, the very first thing that I tell people to do, step one, is literally make a list of everyone you know and that you actually keep in touch with. That could be your college friends, that could be your, family, that could be, church friends, or, just whoever you hang out with, sports, anything of that nature. Just make a list of who you actually know and keep in touch with. And it could literally be anyone. Then make a list of the industries, roles, and geographies you want to think about, the categories of people you want to know. I need to know, like if you have a Dallas patch where I'm from, I want to know as many people in Dallas. I want to know people, let's say, in oil and gas, or I want to know people in the music industry, whatever it is. What type of roles? With Mixmax, let's say you're selling to VPs of sales. That's a role, right? And you can make up any category you want, right? Add as many categories as you want. Then what you start doing is you calling all your friends and family, whoever it is, ask people on your list who they know in any category. The first word, it's like, oh, I know a VP of sales that might be a different industry. But guess what? You know how many VP, like we were in a group together and there's VPs of sales from massively different industries. We both happen to be in tech, but I wasn't always in tech. I was in finance before, I was in mortgage before, things of that nature, right? So people you said it before, the network is actually smaller than you think of, right? So once you start breaking into these categories, what you want to start doing is you want to set up those no agenda meetings to simply learn from those individuals. So let's say that I'm a brand new seller and somehow somebody introduced me to you, Heath. I guarantee you, because this is how most humans operate, most humans they love to help, share, and educate others on their own life. Because most of us, if anyone understands the six fundamental human needs, first four are to thrive, but the two that are for fulfillment are growth and contribution, right? So you naturally want to contribute. So you're going to help someone out. And then this is where it starts to do the daisy chain. If I go, Heath, and I'm trying to sell to VPs of sales, I'm curious. Do you know any other really cool VPs of sales that I could just interview and know? I'm curious. Do you know any other VPs of sales?
I might
Yeah,
know a couple.
exactly. And all of a sudden, you just start to see it grow like rapid fire. So if you did one a day, just these no agenda meetings, eventually, you know what these VPs of sales do in this example? They'll say, hey, Stephen, I'm curious, what do you want to accomplish in life? What are you trying to do? How can I help you? And it happens every single time. And so what you do is you repeat with your new contact and ask who they know, and then who they know. Get one or two people. Sometimes, you want to double and triple. You don't just want to ask for one. Be like, okay, give me two, give me three people. Do you mind sending me a warm intro, or can I use your name when I reach out to them? And that is literally as simple as it is. And now you start growing your network within a said region, industry, role, and that's how you start to grow. So very, very,
Love.
very simple.
It's funny. Like, one thing is, this is the simple definition of the flywheel effect or the network effect, right? I think the other one, I was like, man, I feel like the next like sales kickoff needs to be like the top real estate agent that needs to come in and talk to sales teams, because that is all, like, to be successful in real estate, it
Yeah.
is all your network,
Yes.
right? You sell one house. Hey, who else do you know that's looking? Probably could learn a lot from that industry, just because that's the core of that
Yeah.
industry. And so I think
On
you hit
both
those
the
money.
retail side and the investment side, when I was raising
Yes.
capital, right, you have to, like, until you get licensed, you can only raise capital from people that you know and actually have a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's forced networking, if you will.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like we could go probably for hours. I know you definitely could. I can see the passion. I love it. And so I want to transition to the AI piece that you hit on, right? Because AI it's revolutionizing how we sell, how we lead, and it's also raising the questions about, like, how do we balance those priorities when it comes to sales and sales leadership. And so, forward thinking, how do you see AI impacting the role of a seller and a sales leader in like the next 5 years? It'd probably be shorter than that because it's changing so rapidly.
Yeah, here's my 2 cents, and I will say the same thing that I think it's going to do for the economy. The gap between the wealthy and the poor will actually only get wider. The gap between the top performers and the low performers will only get wider. You are going to actually have less average performers when you utilize AI, in my opinion, in an incorrect fashion, like to try to basically fake connection and fake. And so this is not like my ideas. I mean, this is all over, right? I'm not the first one to say that. And so what typically happens, right? I mean, we see it online all the time. You can now start spotting what AI written language looks like. Funny enough, though, it's, people say that, but then somebody asked me, because I was like, man, I asked one time about a post. I was asking somebody, why do you think this isn't getting any impressions? And she was like, oh, it's probably because you wrote it with AI. And I go, what are you talking about? And she was showing me some of the stuff in my writing, and I'm like, I wrote this manually, like, and it was hilarious. But what I actually did is I was copying what other big writers and influencers and all these stuff were saying, and literally manually typing it. And it dawned on me, damn, like all of these people that you respect and all this stuff, they're just using AI, which is fine. I don't. It's like using a calculator, right? You don't get mad that someone's using a calculator, but what ends up happening is you don't know math. It's very hard to do math if you've been using a calculator your whole life. And it's the same thing with the gap between top performers and low performers, because if you don't have that network, there's a certain level of individual that the reason they're a high level executive is they probably think differently. So they're not going to respond to AI the same way maybe a mid level person. So there's probably places you can utilize AI. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the microwave society, right? Think about even with food, the top athletes, the top people that are trying to stay in shape, they might eat organic, might eat whatever, but the general person will go to the dollar menu, right? Like, just I eat at the dollar menu sometimes, right? And it's in every walk of life. And so I just think that's what's going to end up happening. And so it's just more of a beware sort of thing. This is my 2 cents, in my opinion. I would love to learn, like, I need to get better at utilizing it because I am terrible at it. Everything
Mm-hmm.
is like slow for me right now because I'm that guy that like, I feel like I need to be handmade, right? I want to be
Yeah.
organic and I want to be handmade. I'm not using AI. Like, it's stupid, but I do think AI should be used for tasks, not for faking that, like, I'm connecting with you, not for writing. Like, maybe it's for ideas and maybe there's a space, but like right now I'm still in the mode of, like, how fun would this be to find out at the end of this call, like, oh, this was just my AI version of myself and you weren't really talking to me. I just, even though it looks realistic, like, how would that make you feel?
Yeah, me and my wife were having a conversation about this last night. We were watching a show, and whenever they did the interviews of the people in the show, their eyes were like super, super white. And I was like, they either have this crazy filter that they're using on the lens, or this is AI. But I think, like, to bring it back to what you're talking about, though, I think the way I summarize it is, and I believe this too, is that AI will always be a great co-pilot. AI will never be the pilot, right?
I
And I
hope.
think that's where you're going to see that gap of, like, top performers are the ones that recognize, how is AI a co-pilot to me, just like Go to Network is a co-pilot for me, right? It's not the silver bullet. And I think we're going to see the top of the bottom performers are the ones that try to use these solutions as a silver bullet to their problems. I'll
Yeah.
admit, right, I use AI nonstop. I'm so much more productive because but it's because I use it as a co-pilot, right?
Yeah.
Like, talk about posting on LinkedIn is, I will write my post. I use AI as my editor, where it's like, clean this
Yeah.
up, right? Because I'm not the best writer in the world. When I put together my strategies, right? Like, I'm a thinker, and so I can put my thoughts and just brain dump, but AI helps me organize those thoughts afterwards, right?
See, that second part, I was going to ask you about that because I actually tried that. I tried to write a bunch of stuff and I found that with AI, like, I'm a slow writer because I really
Mm-hmm.
put a lot of thought into it. So there was a couple posts where I wrote all my stuff down, like I would write it. And I said, you know what, let me try it. I think I put into Chat GPT and I said, edit this. And then I even tried Easy Gen by, all that. I've tried a few and I'm like, I don't like it. And I kept hitting refresh. Let me try it again. Let me try. And I actually spent more time And I ended up just going back and just maybe taking one or two sentences max, but it actually took me more time because I'm like, that I don't like it. I don't like it. And now I'm editing AI. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm just curious your thoughts on that because
Yeah, I think it
I
depends,
actually
right?
struggle with it.
Yeah. So one is I write. I basically created my own bots in Chat GPT for that exact reason, because when you create your own bots, I pay for the premium. Is you can actually create the prompt for that bot. So I actually basically created, hey, this is my writing style. I gave the bot a bunch of prompts that I've written before, and was just basically it was like, hey, whenever I ask you to like clean it up, I want you to format it this way. I want it to be this tone. So it's still a representation of me. And I think that's where companies that put out good AI will do that well, right? Is actually not saying, hey, we know how to write better than you because we use AI, but saying, hey, we have built our AI to learn about you and understand your writing behaviors, your writing styles. So when we do suggest something to you, it's actually coming, it's for you and it's coming from you because we're just using what you wrote before.
Yeah.
Right. I think there's going to be, I think that's where the balance is going to come in is like, how does AI actually help you become almost like a superhuman,
Yeah.
right? Doing things in a much faster pace than you originally could. I don't think it's ever, I mean, we're a far way away from it replacing anything. And I think that's the problem right now. It's the new shiny toy. And so people are
Yeah.
just throwing, it's the old spray and pray, throw it at the wall, see what sticks.
You know,
And then I think the people who figure it out are the ones who can tailor it in right.
you make such a valid point. You got me thinking about something specific because everybody's viewpoint is valid and everybody's viewpoint is unique. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
think about writing because obviously I'm writing a book and I want to be authentic and this whole thing about that. What I don't mind using AI for, because I bought the entire Adobe suite trying to figure out like, and I want to train myself on pictures and things of that nature, like entertainment. We don't care if it, I mean, entertainment is fake if you think about like movies and all that kind of stuff. So whether it's cartoons or whatnot, like to me, why is it okay that I'm like, I would want to create like an AI image of myself, like you see on, online and some of these things. And I find that's okay, but I feel like that's entertainment
Mm-hmm.
versus like my writing is supposed to be authentically me. So it's just interesting that you got me thinking about it because writing could also be entertainment, right? um and you're just the producer and you're just the whatever. So like if I'm a producer writing a play, a script, a movie, or anything of that nature, like how's that different? So man, you got me thinking through this, but
Well, and
that's
think about it
interesting.
too, right? Because when you make a production, let's run with that. The writers write the screenplay. The producer's job is to turn that writing and that screenplay into life.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about AI from a writing perspective, we know how to do the producing and the bringing it to life, or at least I'll speak for myself. I know how to do the producing. I can talk very well, but when it
Hmm.
comes to writing down my thoughts and being very clear and articulate, I'm going to need to go to a writer for that production and say, hey, this is what I want to produce, but like, I need your help to organize those thoughts. That's
Same
the way
way.
that I look at it.
I'm the same way, and that's why with writing the book, like it's a project, man, and it takes me time. What I can say in 5 minutes, it takes me an hour and a half to like write out because it's
Exactly.
two mediums and it sounds different. There's no tone. There's not like even just the way that my face crinkles when I just did this, right? There's so much nonverbal communication, right? Hold on, do you need to press the button again?
Can if you want it. So I'm curious where, right, because you have been building this network, right, and you've already had an established network before that, but just from conversations you've had or companies you're working with today, where are you seeing companies have success in actually driving AI that helps drive results from performance perspective or decision making perspective?
Yeah, when I think about it from a sales perspective, the number one place that I actually see productivity is the call summarization, is like taking what we talked about in the call and creating like a follow up email. Because at that point, it's just that to me is a written task. So earlier I said AI for tasks is fine versus like me trying to act like I'm this authentic person. Like hey Heath, great to meet you, blah blah blah, I'd like to get to know you, and all, like the typical prospecting emails, things of that nature. But
Mm-hmm.
like follow-ups where it's a very direct, it's all about like, here's exactly what happened. Oh man, that saves people so much time. And now what happens is you can be in multiple places at once, right? You remember the expensive meetings where you have 20 people in one meeting and only two people talk. Like, what's the point of having those other 18 people? Right now, there's something that we didn't talk about earlier, but it just dawned on me. So I'm just going to get this out. This is why I think you said something earlier about AI making people more productive.
Used the
I
right way.
use the right way. But here's what I don't think people understand, because the words that you always hear in our industry is scale, efficiency, growth. And I liken AI and this uber productivity to burning out the tires on a car. Going faster isn't always the answer. I'm from Texas. Bigger is supposed to be better, but going bigger, fast, like, doesn't necessarily mean it's better, because guess what? If you go too fast, the tires catch on fire. So what
Mm-hmm.
happens is when you take AI, force the amount of productivity or expectation through the human brain, you burn out. This is why so many sellers, like, we stare at screens all day. We're trying to do the same thing we did 20 years ago, right? We're trying to do a full day's work in 1 hour. Our psyche, our soul, our bodies can't handle it. And, I've earned these grades, right? Like, I think about that. Like, you see people that are keeling over. And that's actually part of the reason I wanted to take some time off and semi retire, because I started thinking about it. I'm like, I don't want to be 60 when I try to spend time with my kids. Like, what actually matters? And so that's the danger of not just AI. Anytime we say we want to get bigger, faster, grow, like, you're going to be more efficient, what does that even mean? Does that make us happier? Does that make us better as a human race? And that becomes a philosophical question, right?
That is that if you ask me as a sales leader, what keeps me up at night with the introduction of AI, what keeps me up at night is exactly what you talked about, is that we're going to help people be more efficient and more effective, which is how I measure productivity. But we're going to take advantage of that. And my fear is that 4 to 5x OTE multiplier is about to become a 7 to 8x OTE multiplier. And exactly what you're talking about is it's going to lead to burnout. There's
Yeah.
definitely going to be this, I'm just going to call it, I think it's going to happen, is like it's going to happen, and there's going to be a pullback because we're going to take way too much advantage of it. That's my biggest fear, right?
100%.
And
And you lose
so
great talent. Like, at the end of
yeah.
the day, like, why do you think there's so many people that are now consultants? I'm kind of making fun of myself too, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like we're trying to help these companies recognize that the way we're headed, it's a danger zone,
Mm-hmm.
right? At the end of the day, there is a better way to do it. And funny enough, like, it may be this 1099 route for, bringing in contractors, things of that nature, versus just hiring a bigger sales team, right? So
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, the other one that I wanted to point on was you talked about the meeting summaries. Completely agree with that. And I was chatting with Leslie Vanetz last week about this as well. And she was spot on with it. And she was like, it's not only about productivity, but it's about embracing what sellers should actually be great at doing. And that's active listening. I'll tell you, I'm guilty of that when I have to take notes because I'm so focused on making sure that we get the clear action items, what we need to get done next, that I'm not actually listening to you. I'm not actually like to talking about go to network. I'm not actually building a relationship with you, right? I'm becoming kind of like an order taker and just listening to your questions. Versus now, when I know I can show up to a meeting and I know that AI is taking my notes, I can focus on you completely. I can focus on your problem completely, and I can become a better strategic consultative partner. That changes the landscape of the deal at that.
that is a great call out, because the other part of that is sentiment analysis. And that's the part. So I always think about IQ and EQ, right? And so sometimes we forget, hey, you were talking about the notes and being an active listener. Sometimes you forget, hey, I said I'm going to do such and such, right? Because you are so in the moment and you want to help them, and you can understand how they reacted to something. There's a lot to it. And in those scenarios, I love how you say it's a co-pilot. I mean, like there's a co-pilot for everything nowadays, but that's the common terminology. And I do love that. I do think there's going to be full autonomous task and things that AI does in terms of for
For sure.
humans and things of that
CRM,
nature.
please.
Transactional stuff, you call in for a customer service thing where it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, you just need an answer. You have a little bit of that now. So in those, but again, that's a task. That's why I
But
keep
yeah,
going.
updating
AI for task.
CRM fields, updating nodes,
Yes.
like all of those things are no brainers for sure. I think like if there was ever an area where I do think there's potential where AI can actually be a pilot is an inbound. I don't think outbound will work, but I do think that potentially we get to the point where an inbound AI SDR could work. Because realistically, what is that about? Inbound is about speed to lead. And all it is about making sure that we're getting that meeting booked to actually have a conversation.
Yeah.
That's a task in my view,
Yeah. Or
right?
research. You just made me think about that. Like at the very beginning, when your
Research,
research is a great one, you just got me
pre-meeting
thinking about
briefs,
something.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Here is how AI can also help you with your go to network. Because if you understand, like Heath, let's say you did not know me. I actually think you would refer me to almost anybody because we know each other now. And I'm looking forward to when is it? Next week. Oh, yeah. Next week we're having breakfast. Okay. I'm super happy about that. But here's the thing if you did not know me, and I came and asked you, Heath, can you refer me? And it was somebody important, and now your name's on the line. Would you just refer me willy nilly? Probably not. But if I came to you with the same, and this is the thing people forget about warm intros, just because you know someone doesn't give you the right or expectation from them to give you a warm intro. Do the work. Everything you do for cold outbound, which is the research, you got to know the customer's problems, you got to know everything. If I now come to you and say, Heath, you've got a friend, Jane, that has this problem, more than likely one of these three problems. I really think I can help her with that. I don't want to go into all the solution. You don't need to sell for me, but can you find out if she has any of these three problems? And here's all you do, just reach out to her and say, hey, somebody asked me if I knew you, but they first want to find out, do you have any of these three problems? If you do, I really think you should meet Stephen. You see, I still do the same amount of research, the work and everything, but now when it comes from you, this is why I'm so high on GoToNetwork. Now, again, imagine you put all this type of information in your CRM and then you use an auto dialer, you use an email, whatever, like then you start using the Mixmaxes of the world as just like to automate some of that. You've
Mm-hmm.
done the work. I don't feel like that's inauthentic because you're saying, I did this, 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 and this. Now I'm reaching out to you. It's just that's where I feel like AI can be so powerful, but why I'm also so big on the cold outbound mechanics. It's just that just don't do the cold outbound till you ask for the warm intro first. At least try, make an effort for a warm intro,
I
but
love
it's
that.
still the same game. You're just going to have a little bit more success in the closing when it's coming through a warm intro.
I love that. Man, I know we actually have almost been on this for an hour. So congratulations to you, longest podcast session. I absolutely love it, man. And I feel like we could go for another hour. I'm gonna put the spotlight on you rather than me summarizing. What if you could tell somebody that didn't listen to us and my random sounds and my camera going off? If you could give them three things to take away, like if you didn't listen to anything, what are those three takeaways?
Yeah. Number one, all people have value. And if you don't value people, please don't be in sales, but it's going to be hard to be a good networker. So always value people. All people have value. Number two is everyone has a network. Literally look to your left and your right. Ask every single person you meet, who do they know? Who can you introduce me to? Who do you know? Who do you know? Who's the coolest person? Some variation of never leave a conversation without getting introduced to someone new and somebody valuable. And remember, all people have value, right? And then I would say number three is cold outbound isn't dead. It just should be the last resort. If you think of it that way, you will have win rates beyond your wildest dreams.
Love that. Well, man, Stephen, really appreciate your time and your insights today, dude. It was awesome. I know me and you are getting together next week, which I can't wait for. Just so if other people want to connect with you, network with you, or just follow you, what's your LinkedIn profile handle? And like, what are any exciting projects you're working on that you want to tease anybody with?
Yeah, here's what I could actually use help with. This is my big ask for anyone that's listening. Go follow me on LinkedIn, Stephen Oommen. You'll see my name right above Master of Heath.
Nice plug there.
But it's literally Stephen Oommen. You'll see a basketball icon in front of my name on LinkedIn. Here's what I could use help with. Over the next year, as this book starts to get released and publicized and whatnot, I'm dropping different posts, different articles, hints from the book to market test the content. Give me feedback. So that's number one. Comment on my post, those sort of things. But the bigger thing is I'm going to be interviewing anyone from any industry. It doesn't have to be just sales. If you want to be interviewed for the book, the purpose for the interview is to just understand how people think about networking, how they're building relationships. Because the premise of the book, yes, its underlying is networking, but it truly is how to build a relationship professionally with anyone on the planet, regardless of creed, religion, race, ethnicity. Anywhere you go, if you want to be able to have a good, solid relationship and walk into the room and get along and build a deep relationship with anyone, that's what the book is about. But if you'd like to be interviewed for the book, I need as much empirical evidence, data as possible. Please DM me. I have open DMs on LinkedIn. I would definitely appreciate it. So those are the two things I would ask for anyone listening. And please follow me on LinkedIn and give me your thoughts.
Love it, man. Awesome. Well, appreciate you being on the show. We'll chat again soon, man. Have a good one. All
Thanks
right.
so much, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you.